Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today, I'm joined by Seth Elliott. He is the Chief Marketing Officer over at Gtmhub. Seth, how's it going today, sir?
It's going great, thanks.
Awesome. I am excited to chat with you. You guys are experts in OKRs, something that we're rolling out here on the team at Sweetfish. And we're going to be talking about not just OKRs, but managing an effective marketing team. You know, we are early in the year. Folks are starting to see where are some of their New Year's resolutions and their beginning goals, or maybe they're still setting some of their 2020 goals. So I think it's a very timely discussion for us to have today. To put some context to it, though, Seth, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about yourself and what you and the team at GTM are up to these days.
Sure, that's great. So my background is, 20 plus years now in the startup industry, primarily tech focused, but I've spent a great deal of time across industry types and industry sets as an executive. Everything from specialty pharmaceuticals and cosmetics on one hand to mobile activation, consumer mobile, and now Gtmhub on the other. And I've held roles at the executive suite level, primarily as CMO, but also I've served as strategy officer, as chief operating officer, and even as president in the past. So I have kind of a broader view as to how teams interact with one another and what that means in regards to managing and motivating them at the executive and then the team lead level, which was, I think, particularly relevant as to why both Gtmhub wanted me to come there and why I chose to go to Gtmhub. At Gtmhub, what we really are, we're a software as a service, a SaaS company, and we are delivering a platform for business outcome success. That business outcome success, which sounds kind of, maybe a little ambiguous in nature, is founded upon what we have developed as the most powerful OKRs software platform in the world, in our opinion. And that's what we key off of to help our clients deliver accelerated growth across their organizations.
I love it. And as I mentioned here in the intro, Seth, the OKR methodology is something that we've been digging into lately. For anybody who's not familiar with the OKR methodology, can you give us just kind of the 30 to 60 second definition there, just for context for anybody who might not yet know that acronym? I think a lot of listeners do, but I think it's worth just a quick pause there.
Yeah, sure. And I think you're right. I think a lot of listeners probably do because it's just really gained more and more momentum in the last year or so. But OKRs stands for Objectives and Key Results. It's a methodology that was pioneered originally by Andy Grove at Intel quite some number of years ago. At the time, John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins, the venture capital fund, worked at Intel. And when he then went over to Kleiner Perkins, he kind of ported the OKRs methodology with him. And he then tried to persuade a number of their portfolio companies of the value of using OKRs, most notably Google. So Google adopted OKRs as a management methodology and then had a great deal of success using it. It spread its way to a certain degree through Silicon Valley. Not so long ago, John Doerr wrote a book called Measure What Matters about OKRs, among other things, and the success that Google and other companies and organizations have had. And that's kind of snowballed, and so it's become much more prominent, and there are a large number of people adopting the OKRs methodology. And it's designed to accelerate the growth and bridge the gap, and this is where we really come in, bridge the gap between strategy and execution for companies and other organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without execution, you can have strategy coming out your ears and really no success. What we try to do here on the show, Seth, is, as you and I have talked about, is give folks some practical things that they can use in execution. The first thing I know you wanted to share with listeners on this topic of managing an effective marketing team is using data to align marketing teams. You know, we talk a lot about the data-driven marketer and using data for better marketing outcomes, but we're usually talking more about what we're doing to face the end customer or our future customers. Tell us a little bit about what you guys see the role of data in aligning marketing teams internally.
Sure. And I think for us, when we talk about alignment, we don't think of it even so much as just aligning the internal marketing team, although clearly that's important, but aligning the marketing team in the context of the organization as a whole and amongst their other colleagues. And one real important telling point on that subject is that only about 9% of managers say that they can rely on colleagues and other units most of the time. And that's a real big telling point when you think about the alignment issues that may exist across teams and organizations. So how do you help solve that? Well, OKRs is one way, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you also solve that with data. So first, we, the same way that many other marketers do, as you referenced, we focus on data in the marketing team. We focus on the outcomes that data suggests and the insights that data brings. But we don't do that simply from the standpoint of my team reporting to me and us evaluating their success outcomes from the data that they are delivering to me across whether it's lead generation or SQLs or whatever our particular metrics are. We try to instrument the business as a whole, and then we instrument the individual parts of that business. So we're a SaaS business, and the examples I just gave, I think, are kind of valuable. We have a funnel. That funnel begins with some form of leads that then generally work their way down to, for us, marketing qualified leads. And then they work their way down to sales qualified leads, which are meetings. And then those meetings are passed to, obviously, the sales team. And the AEs then do something with those meetings. And so there's a whole set of instrumentation around that data. But beyond the obviousness of that instrumentation, there's data surrounding what actions have to be taken in order to succeed at those key data points. So, for example, how many calls might a sales development rep need to make on average in order to secure a sales qualified lead? How many enterprise leads does the marketing team need to drive on any individual landing page in order to, in general, funnel down to a sales qualified lead? So we take all of that data as the kind of the core that we use amongst the colleagues, the marketing colleagues. And my case, marketing also includes SDRs, sales development reps, report to me as CMO. And then we take that data and we align that data across particularly our colleagues in sales and AE functions, but even with our colleagues across the product and engineering teams, because so much of this is interrelated. And that's where I think it becomes quite important, is that when I'm managing the marketing team, the obviousness of their individual performance from the specific data points that they're required to succeed at is perhaps less the issue that needs to be addressed than aligning that data across the organization as a whole. And that's where I think it becomes the leverage point, is to lever that data beyond just the simplicity of the team itself.
Yeah, I hear a lot of marketing and sales leaders going back and forth on, it seems like every organization is a little bit different in where sales development reports. It sounds like they report into marketing, as you mentioned for yourself, Seth. Do you feel like that gives you a better ability to collect and manage those data points on the front end of the sales process with the SDR team rolling up into marketing?
I mean, this is a very important question, right? For me personally, I feel that it does. I feel that it's a natural, but I think it's very dependent on your organization and where the responsibility lies. I view myself as CMO, and we do this, of course, at Gtmhub, obviously, as responsible for generating lead flow that drives its way all the way to the point where an AE can legitimately have a sales call or a meeting. So it gives me more than just a bird's eye view. It's the entire funnel conduit. And by having that opportunity to manage the SDRs, not only do I see that, but it really allows me to integrate the marketing team much more closely than they might otherwise be in regards to sales. There's no question in the minds of my marketing managers what they need to do. They regularly deal with their colleagues next to them that are sales development reps. There's really never any gap between an understanding of why are we marketing. Any activity that they engage in as a marketer, which is to a certain degree also because we drink our own champagne and all of these individuals have OKRs that are very clear to them. But having their colleagues sitting right next to them makes that alignment much stronger. And that alignment occurs not simply because they're in the same room, but because they're all focusing on the same insights that come from the data.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. You probably already know that we think you should start a podcast if you haven't already. But what if you have and you're asking these kinds of questions? How much has our podcast impacted revenue this year? How's our sales team actually leveraging the podcast content? If you can't answer these questions, you're actually not alone. This is why Casted created the very first content marketing platform made specifically for B2B podcasting. Now you can more easily search and share your audio content while getting greater visibility into the impact of your podcast. The marketing teams at Drift, Terminus, and here at Sweetfish have started using Casted to get more value out of our podcasts, and you probably can too. You can check out the product in action at casted.us/growth. That's casted.us/growth. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah, absolutely. And I can see how that, that tighter relationship, that closer proximity leads to that. How about, you talked about sales and then product and engineering when they're a little bit further removed from your department, finding out what data can you collect to see how that aligns and inform what you do. What recommendations do you have for other marketing leaders about trying to align on data if they don't have direct access over the control of what data is being gathered, what they can see, those sorts of things in those further removed points in sales and then in product as well?
Well, it's a little challenging to answer what to prescribe for someone else because we happen to be in the position, as I said, you call it drinking your own Kool-Aid, we call it drinking your own champagne. We use the Gtmhub platform in our own business. And part of what the Gtmhub platform does is it aggregates the data from a host of third-party tools that we use and that everybody else uses. Everything from Jira to Google Analytics, from your CRM, HubSpot, or Salesforce, to utilizing Slack or MS Teams. And because we do that, and because OKRs by their very nature are designed to be transparent, that flow of data, whether it's from my marketing team, used by them and therefore viewable by the engineering team, or whether it's a set of engineering and product data that they are gathering, that's visible and actionable by the company as a whole, and therefore particularly my team. So my strong recommendation, of course, the first recommendation is you should use Gtmhub as a platform, but the real recommendation in regards to what we developed is to have a source by which you can aggregate the data that you're already pulling from all of your tools and surface that to the company or to the managers as a whole for actionable insight purposes.
Yeah, I mean, the common thread there, no matter what the platform is, the aggregation of that data into, more or less one dashboard, because if everybody's looking at their own dashboard, then that's where the misalignment happens. But to the extent that you can create a single dashboard from that aggregation of data across the functions, that's where you can really start to see some improvement. Seth, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is this idea of productivity management. You guys talk a lot about that productivity management is really the job of any manager today. Can you unpack that a little bit for us today, and especially within this context of running a more effective marketing team?
I think it's quite interesting that we just happened to land on it right now, because it's super related to what you just asked about and the comment that we were just talking about in regards to that data flow, right? So if you think a little bit, even just an aggregated dashboard doesn't quite do the trick necessarily. One of the truisms that I've found across particularly marketing teams in the last decade or so is that data in of itself doesn't solve problems, right? Insights solve problems. So if the data that you're surfacing isn't leading to insights, you don't know how to solve problems or improve. And that is very much related to what we were just talking about, and it's super related to productivity management, because there are a lot of tools out there to surface data of both perhaps the actions of any particular staff or individuals, as well as the result sets that you're delivering from your marketing activities. But what you really need to know is, where are you supposed to be going? How are you supposed to get there? And then instrument the results. I use the word instrumentation a lot because it's really an important component of the way that we run our business, the way that I run my marketing teams, and the platform that we deliver. And it's because of the circumstances that we're referencing right now. So let's imagine that you have a unified dashboard, but you're not entirely sure what outcome you're focused on. Doesn't necessarily help you. Let's imagine you have a unified dashboard, but you can't develop insights from it. You haven't instrumented the business elements. You don't know where to go with that. And so the productivity management piece is a little less, in my opinion, about how to manage. Hopefully that's a different discussion that people can have in regards to some of the best practices of being a manager, and much more about how do you actually help your team to both know where they should be going and how they're going to get there, and then evaluate data as it's coming in to help them optimize that process. So that comes back again to things like saying, oh, well, how many visitors to this page do we need to have in order to drop this all the way down the funnel to one sales qualified lead? And then you can start instrumenting the elements of, what are we doing in regards to things like click-through rates for the ads on channel X versus channel Y? All of that type of activity is stuff that I expect my marketing team to be able to manage on their own, but I'm there to help mentor the understanding of the instrumentation and to help provide them with assistance in the optimization. Both my style and the style at Gtmhub is very much reliant upon, we try to great people, and we expect that they will focus on how to get where they need to go, and they look to their managers and executives to help optimize that process. And that's what we think of when we think of productivity management.
Interesting. So, as someone was talking about this the other day, I can't remember if it was a conversation on LinkedIn or Twitter or something. I think it was a question someone in my network on LinkedIn asked about, on a sales team, for instance, how much leeway do you give in how prescriptive you are in how things tend to get done? It seems like you kind of lean towards, okay, if we have a dashboard, and to your point, a dashboard isn't the end all be all you have, because if I have a 4-year-old sitting in the seat of a car and sees a dashboard and sees a speedometer, that doesn't mean anything, right? One, can they reach the pedals? And two, do they know what the speed limit is and how to operate the car? So kind of those next steps of learning to drive, and obviously going from 4 to 16, the analogy kind of broke down there. You're leaning in this, I'd say one side of the spectrum is being very prescriptive on, this is how we do it. The other side of the spectrum saying, these are the results we're trying to drive. Here are kind of the lanes on the road. Stay between these. And if you're kind of veering off, come to your manager for some guidance on maybe how to do it more effectively. It sounds like you lean more on that latter side of that. Is that fair to say, Seth?
It is fair to say, both philosophically, but also because of the deployment of effective objectives and key results. That's the linchpin that allows for that. And you can almost think of objectives and key results as the counterpoint to command and control, right? You have a command and control style organization, and objectives and key results are designed to say, listen, let's signpost the major directions at each perhaps step of the organization, whether you want to say the CEO level or the group team level. But let's assume that the individuals on the ground are the ones best equipped to figure out how to achieve the goals of where we want to go and to identify their key objectives and their key results that need to be achieved in order to move the organization forward. And so it's only because we have this framework of OKRs alongside another important piece, which we'll talk about in a moment, which is the ability to in real time evaluate the progress on those key results. But it's only by having that strong OKR environment that I think that we can do more than pay lip service to the idea that we just said, that we can actualize it in nature.
Yep, absolutely. And so that really kind of ties nicely into the last thing I wanted to chat with you about today, Seth, and that is what some call that regular cadence of accountability in the OKR system. It's really where the rubber meets the road in setting and working towards those key results and tying those big picture priorities to the daily tasks. Let's camp out on that as we wrap up today and give folks some actionable next steps to kind of bring it down to the ground level.
Sure. And I think it's funny, the analogy of bringing it down to the ground level is a good one because we have to start at the 50,000 foot level. And the reason we have to start there is that strategy has to be articulated. That's the first thing. Right? For an optimized marketing strategy or for an optimized organizational approach, you have to identify and articulate the essential goals that you're focused on. And something like just over 50% of middle managers, it's like 55% of middle managers can name 1 out of 5 of their company's top priorities. So it's a little bit worse than it sounds, right? They've been given 5 chances to name 1 top priority, and only 55% of them can even do that. The first thing
50% can name 20%. That's
right.
That's all. It's like it's
right.
it's 50%. It sounds bad, but it's worse than it.
Yeah, it's much worse than that, right? Exactly right. And so first you have to start there, right? And then from that foundation, you can start empowering individual employees to help define success and identify how to get there. So we talked a little bit about that, right? Now, the issue becomes, what's the reality about that? Well, in large organizations especially, sometimes things like OKRs simply go awry. And one of the reasons they go awry is it's great to talk about strategy. And then it's great to talk about allowing the person on the ground to really set the daily direction in order to achieve that strategy. But where the rubber meets the road is that happening? And in kind of traditional OKR methodology, you have these weekly check-ins. But in order to do weekly check-ins, you have to update the status of each of those key results, which means that if you're not careful, you end up with hundreds or thousands of people spending hundreds of thousands of hours OKRing instead of doing their jobs and getting the power of OKRs. So in order to connect the strategy and the execution, in order to take advantage of the power that we're talking about, these superpowers of OKRs, something else has to kind of split their way into the mix. So what we've done is created something that we call dynamic key results. And this goes back to the whole idea of using data. And it's particularly relevant for marketing teams, but it's relevant for any team across the organization and any individual in our opinion. And that is to connect all of those data tools that everyone is using every day anyway into the key results on an automated basis so that you as an individual can quite easily see what your progress is without having to go spend time figuring out the update. And then perhaps as importantly, your manager or your executives or your colleague across teams can also see what progress is, not simply on a weekly basis, but on a real-time basis. And so this real-time issue becomes quite important in today's world. Being able to see the execution on a real-time basis, on a day-by-day basis, helps identify where is it not working. Now we could spend a lot more time talking about the kind of the four quadrants of what happens when you have strategy on one side and execution on the other. And we can talk about each of the quadrants that occurs in terms of when strategy is working, when execution isn't, vice versa, and et cetera. But suffice it to say that I think that you can kind of get the picture that in order to connect these daily activities to the big picture priorities, there's a methodology for it. But if you don't have a mechanism that truly allows for the real-time evaluation, that methodology maybe starts to fall flat and it doesn't serve you. And that's what we find to be really important. So by using the data to align teams, in my case, it's a marketing team, but in our case, it's teams as a whole. So to cross-align teams within and across the organization, to focus on helping them achieve productivity by using that framework to instrument the business, and then to add this idea of a dynamic key result so that instrumentation is visible in real time. That's what allows us, I think, to create these really highly leverage effect teams, and particularly on the marketing and SDR side.
Man, Seth, you wrapped it up better than I could. That's exactly where I was going. As I thought about what you've shared here, those were really the 3 points that I think everyone can learn something from. So I won't just wrap them up here. Again, you can hit the 30-second back button. Seth did a really great job, everybody. Just hit that back button and identify those 3 keys that you want to take away from this episode. I think you've given us some very actionable stuff. We've talked, kind of the philosophical reasons behind some of these recommendations, and then some very solid recommendations on down to, how do we make key results, people not spend a ton of time reporting on those key results? Where can we find automation to be able to self-report without taking time to do that so that they can be more effective? Just so many things here. I think you've brought some really great advice to listeners today, Seth. I think there's definitely some opportunity for us to go further, maybe in another episode on that strategy versus execution and breaking down that further for folks. For now, if anybody listening to this has become a fast fan of yours, just like me, what's the best way for them to reach out, stay connected with you, or learn more about Gtmhub?
Sure. Well, of course, for Gtmhub, you can go to gtmhub.com. And if you're interested in the platform, there's a free trial that you can always use on the platform. If you're an enterprise, we have all types of bells and whistles, and I'd be happy to have you connect with some of our experts. But for any company, we actually have something that's really exciting, and that is a core OKR software platform for $1 per user per month. Less than a cup of coffee. And that also, there's a free trial, so you can dig your way in and play with that. In regards to me personally, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find me. You can contact me via Gtmhub. And if you want to ping me on Twitter, it's Seth A. Elliott, 2 L's and 2 T's.
I love it. Seth, thank you so much for being a great guest on the show today.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm really glad we got to chat. It's really great.
Hey there, this is James Carberry, founder of Sweetfish Media and one of the co-hosts of this show. For the last year and a half, I've been working on my very first book. In the book, I share the 3-part framework we've used as the foundation for our growth here at Sweetfish. Now, there are lots of companies that have raised a bunch of money and have grown insanely fast, and we've featured a lot of them here on the show. We've decided to bootstrap our business, which usually equates to pretty slow growth. But using the strategy outlined in the book, we're on pace to be one of Inc.'s fastest growing companies in 2020. The book is called Content-Based Networking: How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. If you're a fan of audiobooks like me, you can find the book on Audible, or if you like physical books, you can also find it on Amazon. Just search Content-Based Networking or James Carberry, Carbary, in Audible or Amazon, and it should pop right up.